The alien princess believed human fighters were legends, until she stood before one. HFY Reddit. The mining outpost came into view after long hours of drifting. It was a lonely shape against the stars, a cluster of broken towers clinging to a barren rock. Lights no longer shone from its windows, and the docking arms looked bent and useless. But to Princess Serenia, it was still a promise of shelter. The escape pod rattled as Dane guided it down. The engines were weak, and the landing shook them both against their restraints. Metal screeched as they slid across the rough platform, then silence fell except for the hiss of cooling pipes. Serenia let out a shaky breath. They had survived. Again. Stay close, Dane said as he forced the hatch open. The cold air outside rushed in, thin and sharp, carrying the smell of dust and rusted steel. Serenia followed him onto the platform. Her silks were torn, her hair tangled, yet she held herself tall, as if dignity alone could keep her safe. The outpost stretched before them, dark corridors, broken machines, and walls marked with the scars of old battles. It was lifeless, but not empty of memory. Inside, their footsteps echoed through the hollow halls. Dane moved ahead with the caution of someone who trusted nothing. He checked each corner before letting her pass, his hand always close to the piece of pipe he had carried from the prison ship. To Serenia, it was strange to see a man treat a scrap of metal like a weapon fit for war, yet in his grip, it looked powerful. At last, they entered a control chamber. The consoles were dead, screens cracked, but Dane managed to power up a single panel using emergency cells. A faint glow lit the room, revealing maps of tunnels and storage areas. This place has been dead a long time, Dane muttered, scanning the data. But there may still be supplies. Serenia looked around the chamber. Dust covered everything, and silence pressed heavily on her ears. It felt wrong for a place once filled with workers to be so quiet. What happened here? She asked. Probably abandoned when the veins ran dry, Dane replied. Or maybe raiders came through. Doesn't matter now. What matters is if there's food, water, and air left. He spoke in that same sharp, practical way, as if survival was the only language he knew. Serenia, who had grown up in a palace of endless comfort, felt the weight of his words settle on her. For the first time in her life, the simple things, breathing, drinking, eating, were no longer guaranteed. Together they searched the outpost. They found crates broken open, tools scattered across the floor, and walls marked with strange symbols. In one chamber they uncovered storage tanks still holding purified water, in another sealed packs of dry rations. Serenia tried one, wrinkling her nose at the bitter taste, but Dane only shrugged. Better than starving. As they rested in the dim light of the control chamber, Serenia watched him. He sat against the wall silent, his eyes always alert. She wanted to know more about him, about the people her tutors had dismissed as myths. Tell me, she said finally, about your kind, about humans. For a while he did not answer, then slowly he spoke. We were never many, not compared to the empires around us, but we learned to fight, to endure. Our worlds were burned, our fleets broken, but still we found ways to survive. Some of us hid, some scattered, some fought until the end. His voice was low, almost heavy. I was born on one of the scattered places. My people taught me that if nothing else, humans endure. Serenia listened closely. His words stirred something in her chest. Endurance was not the way of her people. The Valorians valued control, power, and order. But Dane spoke of survival in its rawest form, facing the storm and refusing to fall. You are not like anyone I have known, she whispered. You do not speak like a soldier, yet you fight better than any I have seen. You do not bow to me, yet you saved me. Dane's eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. I didn't save you because you're a princess. I saved you because leaving someone behind isn't what we do. His words struck her harder than she expected. In her court, every action was weighed, every favor repaid with another. But here was a man who fought for no reward, who protected her without expecting tribute. She realized that the legends of humans had missed something important. They were not only fierce in battle, they carried a loyalty to life itself, to each other that her empire had long forgotten. That night they built a small camp in the control chamber. Serenia lay awake staring at the broken ceiling, listening to the faint hum of old machines. Dane slept lightly nearby, one hand on his pipe, his face calm even in rest. She thought of the stars outside, of the empire that believed her gone, and of the man who was both myth and reality beside her. For the first time since her capture, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt curiosity blooming into respect. And in that respect, a dangerous thought took root, that perhaps her empire was wrong to erase humans from history. Perhaps the galaxy still needed them. Days passed in the broken mining outpost. The cold stone halls became their shelter and the silent machines their company. Princess Serenia had never lived like this before. Her life had always been filled with servants, fine meals, and glittering halls. Now she drank from metal flasks and ate dry rations that left a bitter taste on her tongue. She slept on the floor, wrapped in a rough blanket, and woke each time the wind howled through broken vents. Yet, she did not complain. Partly because she knew complaints would mean nothing here, but also because Dane never complained. He carried wounds that never seemed to slow him, ate the same rations without a word, and kept guard through the night as if sleep was a luxury he could live without. Watching him, Serenia began to feel ashamed of her weakness. If a man who had lost everything could endure, then surely a princess could do no less. Dane taught her things she had never imagined needing. How to hold a knife not for ceremony but survival. How to listen for the smallest sound in dark tunnels. How to conserve water by taking small sips, not full gulps. Each lesson was sharp, practical, and without softness. At first, Serenia stumbled and failed. She dropped the knife. She stepped too loud, she drank too quickly. But Dane was patient in his own way. He did not scold her with words, but his steady gaze told her she could try again and again, until she learned. In time, she did. Her steps grew quieter, her grip on the knife steadier. The fear in her chest did not vanish, but it changed. It became fuel, driving her forward. She realized she was no longer waiting to be rescued by her empire. She was learning to survive. Beside the human. One evening, as they rested near a dim console that still glowed faintly, Serenia spoke. "My people would not believe this," she said softly, "that a princess would eat scraps, sleep on stone, and train with knives." Dane looked at her with those sharp eyes. "Maybe that's what they need to believe," he said, "because if they saw you here, they'd have to admit their world isn't as safe as they think." His words struck her deeply. All her life she had lived in a bubble of safety built by her empire. But here, in the ruins of a forgotten outpost, she understood that safety was an illusion. The galaxy was far larger, far more dangerous, and her people had chosen blindness. Their fragile peace did not last. One morning, the faint hum of the scanners returned, flashing a warning across the console. Ships were nearby. At first, Serenia thought they might be Valorian come to rescue her, but Dane shook his head. No rescue fleet would come here alone. These are hunters. Her stomach tightened. Hunters? For me? For you? For us? Doesn't matter which. He moved quickly, packing what little supplies they had gathered. If they land here, this place becomes a trap. The sound of engines soon filled the air. Through a broken viewport, Serenia saw them. Sleek ships, painted, with strange symbols. Bounty hunters searching for prey. Fear surged through her, but Dane's voice steadied her. "Remember what I taught you. Stay low, stay quiet. And if you have to fight, fight to win." She gripped the knife he had given her, its weight heavy but comforting. They moved through the tunnels as the hunters landed outside. Boots echoed against metal floors, voices barked orders in harsh tongues. The outpost that had been silent for days was alive with danger. Dane struck first. When a hunter entered the tunnel, Dane sprang from the shadows, striking him down with silent force. He moved like a storm again, each motion sharp and brutal. Serena's heart raced as she followed close, her knife trembling in her hand. At last one of the hunters caught sight of her. He raised his weapon, shouting. Serena froze, her body rigid with fear. But then Dane's words echoed in her mind. Fight to win. She forced herself forward, driving the knife at the hunter's arm. He cried out, the weapon falling from his grip. Dane finished the fight, but Serena stood there staring at her shaking hands. She had acted. She had not frozen completely. Dane looked at her, his expression unreadable. Good, he said simply. It was only one word, but it filled her with strange warmth. She had earned his approval, not as a princess, but as a fighter in her own right. The battle spread through the outpost. More hunters poured in, but together they fought back. Serena grew bolder, each strike less clumsy than the last. She still feared, but she no longer let fear rule her. At Dane's side, she felt like part of something greater, something the stories of humans had always hinted at. When the last of the hunters fell or fled, silence returned to the outpost. Serena's body trembled from exhaustion, but her spirit felt alive in a way it never had before. She looked at Dane, who stood, calm despite his wounds, his pipe still in hand. You could have left me, she said, her voice low. You could have fought alone. He shook his head. I told you we don't leave people behind. Her gaze lingered on him, the man who was both myth and reality. She realized she was no longer the same princess who had been taken from her. Father's ship. She had walked through fear and learned to stand, and she knew this was only the beginning. The outpost was quiet again, though the silence felt different now. It was no longer only the emptiness of forgotten halls, but the calm that followed after battle. The bodies of the hunters had been dragged into a side chamber, their weapons collected and scattered across a table. Princess Serena sat near the faint light of the console, her hands still trembling from the fight. Across from her, Dane worked silently, checking wounds on his arm and tying strips of cloth around them. She watched him, the weight of questions pressing inside her. For days she had wondered about his people. She had asked, and he had given, only fragments, only hints. But now, after what they had faced together, she needed more than fragments. She needed truth. At last she spoke. You said once that humans were not destroyed, that you scattered. What does that mean? Dane looked up, his eyes meeting hers. His face was calm, but there was something in his gaze that told her he carried a story too heavy to share lightly. It means the Empire lied to you, he said. Her breath caught. Lied? Your people were not the only ones, he continued. Many empires erased us. They feared what we were, what we could inspire. So they said we were gone, wiped out. But the truth is, we refused to die. Some of us fought to the last. Others fled into the dark, hiding on broken worlds, drifting among the stars. We became ghosts in your history. That was easier for them to believe than the truth. Serena leaned back, her heart racing. Her tutors had always told her humans were fables, useful only as stories of warning. She had believed them in part, though secretly she had hoped for more. And now, here sat proof that her people had not only erased history but buried the truth beneath lies. Why would they fear you so much? She whispered. Dane's jaw tightened. Because we refused chains. We fought even when we had no chance to win. And when others saw us fight, they began to believe they could fight too. Empires built on fear do not survive when their subjects remember how to resist. So they decided it was easier to erase us than to face us. His words filled her chest with both wonder and shame. Her empire had hidden this. Her empire, which she had been raised to serve, had feared one species so much that it rewrote history to destroy them twice, once in body and again in memory. She lowered her gaze. All my life, I thought our empire was strong because we built order. But maybe it is weak because it is afraid of truth. For the first time, she felt the weight of her crown pressing down on her, even though she no longer wore it. She thought of her father, of the palace, of all the courtiers who bowed to her without question. Would any of them dare face the truth? Would any of them see value in the man who sat across from her now? Her voice softened. "And you, Dane? Why are you here? What is your purpose?" He leaned against the wall, his eyes fixed on the dim glow of the console. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he answered, "I was raised to remember. My people told me never to forget who we are. They said that even if the galaxy forgot us, even if our name was erased, someone had to keep the fire alive. That's what I've been doing, carrying the flame." Serena felt a chill run through her. The man before her was not just a survivor. He was a keeper of history, a guardian of memory. He was living proof of everything her empire had denied. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to say something, but words felt too small. Instead, she simply looked at him, and in her eyes burned a respect deeper than she had ever known for generals or kings. Later, as they searched the outpost for more supplies, they discovered a hidden chamber. Its doors were sealed, its locks old but unbroken. Dane forced them open, and inside they found dusty machines, data crystals, and records untouched for years. Serena touched the crystals with trembling fingers. "Could these hold—" she began. "Yes," Dane said. "Records. Maybe even the truth they tried to hide." He powered one of the old consoles, and flickering images filled the chamber. Serena gasped as she saw them. Battles long past, ships burning in the void. Humans, standing against forces far greater than themselves. The images were grainy, broken, but clear enough. Humans had fought with a fury she had never imagined. Her heart swelled as she watched. It was not only their strength that moved her, but their courage. They stood together, not for empire or crown, but for each other. They fought not because they expected victory, but because giving up was something they could not do. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "They really were legends." Dane placed a hand on the console. "Not legends, people. People who bled, who died, who endured. And some of us still do." Serena turned toward him, and in that moment she understood. The legends were never meant to glorify humans as more than they were. The legends existed because truth could not be silenced forever. Truth lived on in those who carried it, and Dane was one of them. Her voice was steady now, filled with new strength. "Then I will carry it too. I have seen you. I have seen the truth with my own eyes. They cannot erase that from me." Dane studied her, and for the first time a faint smile touched his lips. "Then maybe humanity isn't as alone as I thought." The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the old console. Princess Serena stood with her hands still resting on the ancient data crystal, her eyes lingering on the fading images of humans who had fought long ago. The fire in their eyes stayed with her, burning brighter than the dust of centuries. She had grown up with tales that humans were nothing more than myths. But now, the truth lived inside her heart. Dane watched her quietly. He had expected disbelief, maybe fear, maybe even anger, but instead he saw resolve. It surprised him, and yet it gave him hope. For so long, he had carried the burden of memory alone. Now, he was not alone anymore. The peace did not last. The console lights flickered as alarms suddenly flared through the outpost. Serena turned sharply. "What is it?" Dane checked the readings, his face grim. "Your Empire's scouts. They've found us." Her breath caught. "They're coming. Here." He nodded. "And they won't leave survivors. If they know what's hidden in this place, they'll destroy it. The records, the proof, everything. And us." Serena felt her chest tighten. She knew he was right. Her father's empire would rather burn this place to ash than allow even a trace of the truth to survive. But she also knew they could not run forever. She clenched her fists. "Then we cannot let them take it." Dane met her eyes, his voice steady. "This is your choice, Princess, to hide from them or to stand against them." She felt the weight of those words. For the first time in her life, she was not a child of the palace, not a figure of ceremony. She was simply herself, and she had to choose. Slowly, she lifted her chin. "We stand." Together they prepared. Dane gathered weapons from the armory, while Serenia worked at the console, copying fragments of the data onto portable drives. Her fingers trembled as she worked, not from fear, but from urgency. If they fell here, at least some of the truth had to survive. Outside, the sound of engines roared as the scouts descended. Dust shook from the walls, lights flickered, and the ground trembled. Serenia tightened her grip on the drive. Dane handed her a rifle, heavier than anything she had ever carried. She looked down at it, unsure. "Can I?" she began. Dane placed a hand over hers. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to stand." His words steadied her. She nodded, holding the weapon close. The first blast tore through the outer wall, shaking the chamber. Soldiers poured in, armored and armed, their banners marked with the symbol of her empire. Serenia's heart wrenched as she saw them, men and women who once would have bowed before her. Now they came to kill her without hesitation. Dane moved, like lightning, firing with precision, each shot dropping an enemy before they could advance. Serenia stayed close, her hands shaking, then steadying as she fired beside him. The recoil startled her, but when she saw one soldier fall, she realized she was no longer powerless. The battle raged through the outpost. Smoke filled the halls, sparks rained from broken lights, and the ground shook with every blast. Yet through the chaos, Serenia felt something awaken inside her. For the first time, she was not living someone else's story. She was writing her own. At last, the last soldier fell. The silence that followed was heavy and sharp, broken only by the crackle of fire from shattered machines. Serenia lowered her rifle, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her arms ached, her ears rang, but her spirit burned with a strength she had never felt before. Dane stepped beside her, his face marked with smoke and blood, but his eyes steady. "You chose well," he said. She turned to him, clutching the drive to her chest. "This must not end here. The truth must spread. My people must know what the Empire has hidden." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you will need to carry it. I can fight, but only you can speak. They'll listen to you before they listen to me." Serenia felt the weight of that. She had been raised as a princess, taught to speak with authority, trained to stand before crowds. Now those same skills could become a weapon sharper than any blade. "I will," she said firmly. "I will tell them, even if they call me traitor. Even if they cast me out. They must hear it." For the first time, Dane allowed himself a smile, small but real. "Then perhaps legends are not only human. Perhaps one day they will tell of the princess who stood beside us." Her heart lifted at his words, not with pride but with a sense of belonging. She was no longer only a daughter of the Empire. She was part of something larger, something true. As they stepped out of the broken outpost into the light of the barren world, the sky stretched wide above them. The wind carried the smoke away, leaving only silence. Serenia tightened her grip. On the drive, her resolve unshaken. The path ahead would not be easy. Armies would come. Her father's wrath would fall upon her. The galaxy would resist the truth. But she no longer feared it. She had seen humanity's fire, and now it burned within her as well. Dane walked beside her, silent, but she felt his presence like an anchor. Together, they would carry the flame forward, and no empire, no lie, could ever erase it again. The palace of Valoria shone with crystal towers that reached toward the sky. Princess Serenia often stood by her tall windows and looked at the stars beyond them. She was young, graceful, and curious, though many said her mind wandered too far from royal duties. While her people believed in order and strict truth, she often found herself fascinated by the old myths told in quiet corners of the empire. Among those myths, one captured her heart more than all the rest. The story of humans. The humans, according to whispers, were creatures of fire and fury. They were said to be small in number but unmatched in battle, fighting even when death was certain. Serenia had heard that they once roamed the stars freely, and their war cries shook the heavens. But her tutors dismissed these tales with disdain. Legends, they called them. Children's fantasies. They told her that humanity had been destroyed long ago, wiped from history, and whatever stories survived were nothing more than dramatic fables. Still, Serenia wondered. She believed there was always some truth hidden within a legend. Her fascination grew whenever she visited the Imperial archives. The shelves were filled with records of wars, victories, and defeats, but none dared mention humans except in footnotes. The careful silence made her suspect the Empire had hidden something. Why erase a people if they had never mattered? Why fear their memory if they had never been real? These questions never left her heart. One evening, as Serenia attended a diplomatic mission along the border of Valorian space, her world shifted. The Empire was in conflict with a rival species, and her father, the Emperor, sent her as a gesture of peace. But peace was fragile in the outer systems. Their ship traveled through dark regions where pirate clans and enemy raiders lurked, and the princess, though guarded by soldiers, could not escape the weight of danger pressing against the hull. The attack came swiftly. Enemy vessels dropped from the void, their weapons firing without warning. The Valorian guards rushed to defend the royal ship, but the battle was uneven. Serenia felt the shudder of explosions beneath her feet as the hull cracked. Her escorts shouted for her to stay hidden, yet the next moment she was dragged from her chamber by masked intruders. Their voices were harsh, their grips rough. She fought, but she was no warrior, and soon the stars outside became a blur as she was pulled into a smaller craft. The enemy ship carried her deep into contested space. Hours bled into days, and the princess sat in silence, surrounded by metal walls and hostile faces. Whispers among her captors reached her ears. Some spoke of ransom, others of selling her to pirates. A few laughed about the chaos her disappearance would bring to Valoria. For the first time in her sheltered life, Serenia felt helpless. She had studied wars in books, but living inside one was different. Fear and anger burned in her chest, and yet beneath them lay a strange, quiet curiosity about what fate awaited her. At last, she was placed inside a cell aboard a derelict vessel. The room was dim, with broken lights flickering on the ceiling, and the stench of rust and oil filling the air. Serenia pressed her back against the wall, breathing heavily, her fine silks torn from the struggle. She thought she was alone, until she noticed the figure sitting in the shadows across from her dot. He was tall but not towering, broad-shouldered but lean, his clothes ragged and stained. His skin bore scars, and his eyes glowed with a strange intensity that unsettled her. He did not move at first, watching her with calm focus as though measuring her worth without a word. At last his voice broke the silence. It was low, rough, and carried an accent unlike any she had ever heard. "You're not one of them," he said simply. Serenia blinked. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you here?" The man leaned forward, and the faint light revealed his face more clearly. He looked unlike any species she had studied. His features were sharp, his gaze unyielding. He did not answer her question directly. Instead, he gave a name. Dane. The name felt strange on her tongue when she repeated it. His words, though unfamiliar, carried echoes of languages she had glimpsed in forbidden texts. Something about him stirred a memory deep inside her mind. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Humans were myths. They had been wiped away before her empire even rose to power. And yet here one sat, alive, scarred, breathing in the same cell as her dot. Her heart raced. She wanted to ask him everything at once, but Dane's eyes warned her not to press. He carried himself with a quiet strength, a weight of experience that even her proudest generals lacked. Though trapped like her, he did not look defeated. He sat with the calm of one who had faced far worse and endured. For Serenia, disbelief fought with awe. All her life she had clung to the idea that humans might have been real, that the legends were more than stories. Now she stood before a man who might prove it true, a legend in flesh and blood. Yet he did not act like one. He was not boastful, not dramatic. He was simply present, and in his presence she felt something her tutors had never taught her, an uneasy sense that the galaxy was larger, older, and far more dangerous than she had ever known. The cell was cold, its walls coated with dust and streaks of rust. The faint hum of failing engines echoed through the ship. Princess Serenia sat on the floor, her back straight but her mind restless. Across from her, Dane remained still, his eyes half closed, his breathing steady, as if he was meditating. He seemed so calm that Serenia found herself watching him, trying to understand how someone could look so at ease while trapped in such a miserable place. At last, her curiosity overcame her hesitation. "You are not like the others I have seen," she said softly. "What are you?" He opened his eyes. They were sharp, alert, and made her feel as if he could see right through her. "What I am does not matter," he replied. "What matters is what happens next." His answer frustrated her. She was used to people obeying her questions. As princess, her words were commands. Yet this man did not bow, did not flatter, did not even acknowledge her status. He spoke to her as if she were simply another prisoner, another person. It unsettled her, but it also intrigued her. "I am Serenia," she said, lifting her chin. "Princess of Valoria." Dane only gave a small nod. "Then you're in more danger than I thought." She frowned. "Why?" He leaned back against the wall. "Because to your captors you are not just a prize, you are leverage. Empires will burn worlds to get you back. That makes you worth more alive than dead. But it also makes you a target." The bluntness of his words struck her. No guard, no courtier had ever spoken to her like that before. In the Empire, people hid hard truths behind politeness. Dane had no such habit. He spoke as if life had taught him that time was too short. For gentle lies. Serenia studied him, her heart still caught between disbelief and fascination. His face, his voice, his very presence. Everything about him whispered of the ancient stories she had grown up secretly believing. Finally, she dared to ask the question that burned inside her. "Are you human?" The silence that followed was heavy. Dane's eyes met hers, and for a moment she thought he would deny it. Then slowly he nodded once. Her breath caught. "Humans are myths. They were destroyed ages ago." "Not destroyed," he said quietly. "Scattered." She leaned forward, her voice lowering. "But the records say—" "Records lie," he interrupted, his tone firm. "History belongs to those who write it. They wanted us gone, so they erased us from the books. But some of us survived." His words sent a shiver through her. The old whispers she had loved as a child were no longer whispers. They were standing before her, alive, breathing, carrying scars that proved the weight of his people's past. She realized then that she was not just sharing a cell with a stranger. She was standing in the presence of a living legend. Before she could ask more, the ship shook violently. The lights flickered, and the walls groaned as if struck by an outside force. Alarms began to wail, their shrill echoes bouncing through the corridors. Serenia clutched the edge of the bench, her eyes wide with fear. "What is happening?" Dane stood swiftly, his movements controlled but urgent. "We're under attack." The sound of weapons fire roared in the distance. Explosions rocked the vessel, throwing Serenia off balance. She stumbled, but Dane caught her arm and pulled her back to her feet with surprising strength. His grip was firm, but his touch was not cruel. It was the touch of someone who had done this many times before, someone used to chaos. Through the cell door, shouts and running. Footsteps echoed. The ship groaned again, heavier this time, as if tearing apart. Smoke began to seep through cracks in the ceiling. Serenia coughed, covering her mouth. "We'll die here," she whispered. "Not if I can help it," Dane said. He scanned the cell quickly, his eyes darting from wall to ceiling. Then, without hesitation, he drove his fist into a panel by the door. The metal bent beneath his blow, wires sparking. He pulled and twisted until the mechanism gave way, and with a loud crack, the door slid open. Serenia stared in disbelief. How did you— No time, he cut in. Stay behind me. Before she could argue, he stepped into the corridor. 2 armed raiders rounded the corner, their weapons raised. Dane moved with a speed she could hardly follow. He grabbed a loose pipe from the floor and swung it with brutal force, knocking one raider to the ground. The other fired, but Dane ducked, closing the distance in a heartbeat. He struck again, the weapon clattering away as the raider fell unconscious. Serenia's heart pounded. She had seen combat training in the Royal Guard, elegant forms and rehearsed strikes. This was different. Dane's movements were raw, unrefined, but devastatingly effective. He fought like a storm, wild, unstoppable, and without fear. He glanced back at her. Move. She followed, her silken shoes slipping on the scorched floor. The ship trembled around them as more blasts shook its frame. They passed broken corridors, sparking panels, and fleeing captives. Dane led the way without hesitation, his every step purposeful, as if he could see a path invisible to her. Wherever an enemy appeared, he struck them down with ruthless efficiency, never slowing, never faltering. At last, they reached an airlock where a small escape pod was docked. Dane slammed the controls, forcing the hatch open. He turned to Serenia, his expression unreadable. Get in. She hesitated, her chest rising and falling with frantic breaths. Who are you really? She asked, her voice trembling with awe and fear. He looked at her for a long moment. The alarms wailed louder, the ship shuddered, but his gaze held hers, steady. I told you, he said simply. I'm human. Before she could reply, he pulled her into the pod and the hatch sealed shut behind them. Moments later, the pod blasted free of the doomed ship, shooting into the dark void of space. The escape pod spun violently as it shot away from the burning wreck. Princess Serenia gripped the seat beside her, her knuckles pale, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the alarms. Outside the small window, the ship that had held them both prisoner broke apart in a storm of fire and metal. Enemy raiders circled it like vultures, tearing it apart piece by piece. Inside the cramped pod, Dane worked quickly, pulling open panels, checking wires, and forcing the old systems to respond. His movements were rough but sure, like someone who had spent his whole life repairing machines under fire. Serenia tried to steady her breathing, but the closeness of the walls and the roar of the engines made her chest tighten. Are we safe? She asked, her voice shaking despite her effort to sound calm. Not yet, Dane replied without looking at her. His hands moved fast, pulling levers and pressing glowing keys. This pod wasn't made for long travel. We'll need to reach a station before the systems fail. And if we don't? He glanced at her, his sharp eyes calm even as sparks flew from the controls. Then we don't. His blunt answer chilled her, but it also made her strangely trust him. He did not hide the truth. He did not try to comfort her with soft lies. He told her the danger as it was, and that honesty was more solid than any false promise. Moments later, the pod shook again. Serenia looked through the small window and saw a raider ship turning toward them. Its cannons lit up, preparing to fire. They've seen us, she gasped. Dane's jaw tightened. Strap in. Before she could argue, he slammed his fist against the controls and the pod lurched forward. Engines screaming as they pushed far past their limit. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light as the pod dove between wreckage, weaving through burning debris. A bolt of plasma sliced past, so close it lit the cabin in a blinding flash. Serenia flinched, covering her face, but Dane stayed, steady, hands firm on the controls. The raider fired again, the shot clipping the tail of the pod. Alarms screamed, smoke filled the cabin, and Serenia felt her stomach twist as they spun out of control. She cried out, but Dane gritted his teeth and pulled hard on the controls, forcing the pod back into a straight line. Hold on, he shouted. The pod shot downward, diving into a nearby asteroid field. Chunks of rock floated everywhere, massive and sharp, spinning slowly in the void. The raider followed, firing again and again, but Dane used the asteroids as cover, darting between them. With movement so sharp, Serenia felt her body slam against the harness. Her breath caught each time they scraped past a spinning stone. Every impact a reminder of how thin the line between survival and death truly was. Finally, after what felt like forever, the pod slid behind a massive asteroid, its shadow hiding them. Dane killed the engines, leaving them drifting in silence. The raider swept past, its scanners searching the rocks, but then it turned away, unable to find them. Serenia let out a breath she had been holding far too long. You flew us through that? No one I know could have done such a thing. Dane leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead. It wasn't flying, it was surviving. She stared at him, still trying to calm her pounding heart. She had watched pilots all her life, some of the finest in the Empire, and none of them could have moved a vessel like that through such danger. His skill was not graceful or trained in academies. It was born of necessity, sharpened by struggle. He was living proof of what her empire had feared for centuries. Her voice softened, filled with awe. The stories, they were true. Humans fought like storms. They never surrendered, even when everything was against them. Dane gave a small, humorless laugh. Stories always make us bigger than we were. We're just people, princess. People who refuse to die quietly. The pod floated silently in the asteroid's shadow. The lights flickered weakly, warning them that power was draining. Serenia knew they could not stay there forever. Her gaze lingered on Dane as he checked the controls. Again, he carried himself as if danger was simply part of living, as if fear was an old companion he had long learned to ignore. "Why are you here?" she asked suddenly. Why would a human end up in a place like this? For the first time, his face tightened, his eyes shadowed. Because there are still enemies who want to finish what they started long ago. I was caught trying to stop them, and now I'm here. His answer was short, but it carried a weight she could not fully understand. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, the pod jolted again. The console beeped with a warning. Oxygen levels dropping, engines failing. "We can't stay hidden," Dane said firmly. "We'll have to find somewhere to land, somewhere we can survive." "Where?" she asked, panic rising again. He pointed at the dim scanner, where a faint signal flickered. "There. A mining outpost. Abandoned maybe, but it's our best chance." The pod engines coughed as Dane pushed them alive again. The little vessel lurched forward, slipping out from the asteroid's shadow, heading toward the unknown. Serenia clutched the seat once more, her eyes never leaving the man who guided them. She realized with a strange mix of fear and wonder that her life no longer rested in the hands of her empire's soldiers or her father's fleets. It rested in the hands of a human.